I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And in joining me, I have the Silver Stock Investors, Peter Krauth. Welcome, Peter, and Happy New Year.
Hi, Mike. Happy New Year to you, and thanks for having me once again.
No, that's not a problem. This is the time of the year I like to take a look back and reflect on what happened, and then a look forward to what to expect for the next year. So let's take a look back at the silver market. It was kind of a strange year. We had a lot of surges, a lot of pullbacks. We essentially ended up where we started, but we look like we kind of put silver in this box now between $21 and $26. Um, your thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. It was kind of a strange year. Lots of activity, and yet started out and ended at the same place. So right around about 23-ish or so, or just south of 23. Um, the what was interesting, and I guess maybe what to some extent surprised me a little bit, was that the pullback in the sort of what I consider the investment side of silver. So that would be jewelry, silverware, and net physical, so coins and bars, that kind of thing. All those three categories on the what I consider the investment side were down, and down pretty strongly, especially in the silverware. But still, both jewelry and investment were down about 20%. And although that's significant, if you look at what happened in 2022, so 2023 was down about 20% over 2022, but 2022 was an exceptionally strong year in both of those. We hit records, in fact, in jewelry demand for silver, and we hit an all-time record in net physical investment. And so a pullback of 20% is really, with that in mind, is not all of that surprising. And I think that actually bodes well for what we might see in 2024 over last year. And if we look for reasons why we saw this pullback, I think the biggest reason is India is a huge market for silver, and they bought excessively in 2022, and so the pullback was a bit of a reckoning, I guess, especially in that market. Somewhat in Germany as well on the investment side. Some new taxes came in, investment taxes on silver, and so that affected demand there as well for physical. So as I say, I think that we're going to see a considerable bounce back on the investment side, silver jewelry and physical silver in 2024.
So with the pullback on the investment side of the demand curve, was that just a reversion of means, or
Yes, it was, in fact, because if you look at say 2023 for jewelry, here are the numbers. 2021 was 182 million ounces for jewelry. 2022 was 235, and that was an all-time record. And then 2023 was back to 2021 levels at 182 million ounces. So that was much more in line with sort of what's been normal, much closer to normal. You have the same kind of thing happening with silverware. So 41 million ounces in 2021, 74 million ounces in 2022, and then back to 39 million ounces in 2023. And then if you look at net physical investment, 274 million ounces in 2021, 333 million ounces, an all-time record in 2022, and then back to 263 million ounces. So in each of these three categories, almost exactly back to their pre-2022 levels. So these were much more sort of normal levels last year, coming off of an exceptionally strong 2022. So I do think that we're going to see some strong bounces, especially on the net physical investment side. And we can maybe get into this a little bit, but that's part of sort of my macro outlook and my reasoning for why I think that we'll see physical investment bounce back pretty strongly this year.
Okay, so the question about 2023 was a little narrow. The better question would have been what caused the demand spike in 2022 rather than, why was things down in 2023 would have been a
Right.
better question, I suppose.
Sure. I think that again, as we say, India being a big demand factor for silver, big market, they had they were I guess undersupplied. Their industry and industries and investment buying was relatively soft for them in 2021. So really, they caught up in 2022. And I think that what is also impressive is that in 2022, that's when we had the Fed start to, and most central banks start with their aggressive rate hikes. So for silver buying to be so strong in that year is really actually exceptionally telling, I think, to see that much buying when was this headwind from rising interest rates, because rising interest rates means opportunity cost for buying silver. Silver doesn't pay you any dividends, but bonds do. And so investors had the opportunity to buy treasuries that were starting to pay them 3%, 4%, and ultimately, eventually 5%. So in that kind of scenario, to see silver purchase levels be so high. Part of it restocking, part of it physical demand. I think as a safe haven really speaks to the interest in silver, and I think that again, it typically does follow gold. It followed gold and performed quite nicely in terms of demand in 2022. So again, being an exceptional year, I think 2023 just kind of reverted somewhat to the mean and went back to sort of more closely to normal levels. One of the things that I think is important to note about demand in 2023 was industrial demand, and that was a total outlier. The Silver Institute had forecast that industrial demand, which includes things like solar panels, which is a big subcategory of industrial, includes things like electronics and electrical, things like medical applications, industry in general. That was forecast to grow 4%. It actually doubled that number and grew 8% last year. And solar was a huge factor in that. And if you'd like, we can get into some of those details a little bit more.
Yeah, please. Let's take a look at the industrial demand because, as everybody should know, silver is kind of a bipolar metal. It's a little bit precious metal, and it's a lot industrial metal, and it's the industrial side of the equation is generally the side that drives the silver price.
Exactly. So here's what was impressive. I mentioned that industrial demand had double the growth that was forecast by the Silver Institute. And so solar in 2023 went from 25% of industrial demand to 30% of industrial demand. And industrial demand hit an all-time high of 632 million ounces. So industrial was about 63% of overall demand last year. Really just very impressive. And as I say, very much driven by solar because it's such a huge chunk of industrial. And to get some perspective, in 2021, solar represented about 110 million ounces of the silver market. Then by 2022, it had grown to 140 million ounces. In April last year, the Silver Institute said they thought that solar would represent 161 million ounces. I thought that was low, and by mid-year last year, I'd been saying I thought that solar would represent closer to 180 to 190 million ounces. And when They revised their numbers back in November for what they felt would be the overall 2023 estimates. They said that this is how they, came up with their numbers. They said solar would be 30% of industrial, and industrial would be 632 million ounces. And if you do the math, that's 190 million ounces. So that was actually the top end of what I was expecting we would reach from solar. So really, solar has just grown by something like 73% in just 2 years. So over its 2021 levels to 2023, solar demand grew by 73%. And that's just exacerbating the deficits. For the last 3 years, the silver market has been in a structural deficit. It hit a huge record of 260 million ounces of deficit in 2022, had about 140 million ounces of deficit in 2023. So the last 3 years of deficits represent almost half of an entire year's supply. And your listeners may be wondering, so, how can you operate in a deficit and year after year? And the answer really is that there are above ground inventories in a few places. The three main places are in the silver ETFs that are backed by silver. You have the futures markets that have some silver backing, and then you have just silver owned by individuals and or companies, and they may decide at some point to what we call dishoard or sell that silver back into the market. And to some extent, that helps to supply and meet the deficits, but that can only go on for so long. We don't know, nobody really knows how big above ground inventories are. The estimates are somewhere perhaps around 1 billion or more ounces, but 1 billion or more ounces is a year's supply. And the last 3 years of deficits reaching almost 500 million ounces means that perhaps half or a bit less than half of that has already been eaten up. So these deficits, in my view, could probably only go on for a few more years, and then it's really going to hit home in terms of putting very big upside pressure on the silver price.
Yeah, the solar market doesn't surprise me at all. Like where I live in Prince Edward Island, I can go in my neighborhood of, say 3 square blocks, and there's at least 8 or 10 homes in my, immediate neighborhood that have put solar panels on their roofs in the past
Absolutely.
year. No, that's a small sample and just a snapshot, but if that's happening everywhere, this, solar seems to be, as far as, green energy technology is starting to get some tailwinds behind it, and that'll likely continue to push the silver demand, I would think.
Exactly. So the International Energy Agency is forecasting by 2027, so that's 3 years from now, that solar will be the single largest source of energy on the globe. So it'll surpass coal and natural gas. That'll be for the first time ever. Solar will be the biggest source of electricity. And manufacturing capacity has been growing tremendously. China dominates that at about 80% of global capacity. But in 2021, that grew 55%. In 2022, it grew another 55%. I don't have the final numbers, but in 2023, it was forecast to grow about 28%. My guess is it's probably easily above that. And so what's also important for listeners to know is what's happening in the technology of solar panels. About 3 years ago, the dominant technology was something called PERC or PERC. And that's really been changing very quickly. 2023, the forecast was that these two newer technologies, being TOPCon and HJT, would actually reach 35% of manufacturing capacity. And now the Silver Institute is actually forecasting that in 2024, TOPCon is going to represent 50% by itself of manufacturing capacity. So these new technologies are being adopted very, very quickly by producers of solar panels. But what is important to know about that is that TopCon, which will likely be half of all manufacturing capacity this year, requires 50% more silver than the previous dominant technology. And the next up and coming technology, HJT, requires 150% more silver than the previous technology. So these solar panels, these newer solar panels, are just going to require even more silver per panel. And of course, the reason to do that is because they are more efficient. So it is worthwhile for the manufacturers to put more silver into the panel because there's more energy output. So that is really another interesting dynamic to watch in terms of what's affecting silver demand and how that relates to the solar industry.
So if I'm hearing you correct, the real key to watching the demand elements for silver is going to be green technology, specifically solar panels, as being the big drivers of demand. And as that pushes, that should push the price.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, there's a quirk in the silver supply, mine supply aspect of the silver market, and that is that only about 25% of silver comes from what we call primary silver mines, where silver is the main output of that mine. About 75% of all mined silver actually comes as a byproduct of mining gold, copper, lead, and zinc. So the companies, the miners that produce these other metals where silver is a byproduct, don't really care that much about what the price of silver is. It's just not that significant to their revenue streams. So even if the silver price goes from, say, $23 to $33, they'll just keep churning out whatever amount of silver their mine produces, and they'll accept the higher price. They're not going to make that much effort to try and produce more silver, again, because it's a small part of their revenue stream. So you can have that makes the silver supply what we call price inelastic. So a higher price will not necessarily translate into higher supply, which is what you tend to find in economics 101 in terms of how supply reacts to price. So that just exacerbates silver prices. It could help push them even higher.
Yeah, no, definitely could. So we kind of touched upon three things that were surprised in 2023. The reversal of mean to for the investment side of the silver markets, the rapid increase in the industrial side, particularly in solar panels. Um, was there any other surprises that caught your attention as it affected the silver markets?
Well, I'm going to say perhaps not so much on the silver market, but if I think back to 2023, uh, one of the things maybe on the more on the macro side that really surprised me, it to some extent probably helped silver. It did spike a little bit at the time, but we had that banking crisis. I believe it was right around the end of March in 2023. And that certainly took the market by surprise. I'm not convinced that that has fully played out yet. A lot of people have to renew their mortgages. There's a lot of, this year and next, there's a lot of corporate debt that is coming due that's going to have to be renewed and refinanced at considerably higher levels, even if the Fed does start to cut rates and central banks cut rates to some extent. So I'm not sure that we've seen the full effect of that yet. And that's one of the reasons that I think that net physical silver is actually going to, the demand of that is actually going to turn out to be pretty strong in 2024. I think risk of recession, real recession, not soft landing, is higher and underestimated by the market. And I think that could cause deeper cuts from central banks than we're really forecasting right now. And so deeper cuts in interest rates take away the opportunity cost of owning silver, like for gold. And so I think that when that starts to get priced in, if that plays out the way I'm expecting, then silver actually could bounce quite nicely from that.
Wonderful. Let's take a look into the crystal ball and take a look at what you see happening in 2024. We've kind of alluded to it in a few cases, and then we'll take a step and take a look at the actual miners themselves.
Sure. So I think that we're going to see some growth in, as I say, the physical side, silverware, jewelry. These will start to climb. Industrial, I do think, is going to climb as well from current levels. I'm not expecting an 8% growth necessarily. And so some of the concern is that if we hit recession, silver being more of an industrial metal than gold, for example, is going to could feel the weight of that. But it's important to remember that with solar driving it so much, and so much of solar being supported, mandated, subsidized, et cetera, by governments around the world in the green transition, it's likely, I think, that demand of silver from solar will hold up pretty well. So I think that we could see, for example, silver reach perhaps as high, and this would be perhaps on concerns of recession. So silver being bought as a safe haven. Silver tends to be the physical demand tends to be the wild card in the silver price, because industrial demand is easier to forecast and to price in. It's easier to see how that growth has come. It's been very steady for the last 5 years or so, the growth in industrial demand. But it's the physical side that has been more wonky and has been up and down more. So I think that when you face periods of uncertainty and worries about fiscal side of things that and economic slowdowns, and then you have rate cuts, I think we could see investment demand bounce pretty strongly. And I think that will, as I say, be the wild card. That could help push silver prices considerably higher. And I think even probably by the end of the first half of 2024, we may see silver bounce to as high as $28. And then I think that recession plays out, as rates get cut back, and perhaps get cut back more than what the market's forecasting right now. I think that in the second half of this year, we could probably see silver at some point reach closer to about $30. And that should be really kryptonite. Sorry, not kryptonite, but it should be the opposite. It should be like lighting the fuse on these some of these silver miners and some of the juniors in particular.
Yeah, we've had enough kryptonite in this
Exactly.
industry. We don't need to be gold mining
We
for more of that, that's for
That's right.
sure. Yeah, let's talk about the miners themselves. In spite of, what's been actually a really, not a bad market for silver, the miners themselves have kind of languished and are trailing well beyond where they should be.
Absolutely. And that's I mean, as much as I'm not the only one to say it, and as much as people have heard this, that is where the opportunity lies. And silver is like that. Silver underperforms, or basically does, or perhaps does nothing many times in for a period of months and sometimes years. But then when it outperforms dramatically, and in sometimes over the very, very short term. And so, it will also provide outsized gains because of that. And so, people need to take advantage of these quiet periods, which we've had for the last perhaps year, a couple of years, in fact, and use them to do their research, use those times to accumulate and be there and be ready for when the explosive action comes, upside explosive action, and then take profits, because you don't want to be buying when everyone else is, You want to have bought well before and be taking profits when everyone else is starting to buy and jump into that market. And those times come. They have proven themselves to come repeatedly over the last multiple decades. And that's as I say again, where the opportunity is. Really, people need to use the volatility in silver, be patient, and that's something that unfortunately has become, I think, rarer and rarer these days. Is patience. Hate to say it, but I think younger generations would benefit from trying to work on that and get used to that, and perhaps do some of the research that it requires to see that how this market has behaved and that the opportunities there, and to really, as I say, accumulate positions in some of these companies, and the odds are very strong that they will benefit quite nicely when that explosive action comes, and it does. It really does. Sometimes at the least expected moments.
So, at what price for an ounce of silver do you see that'll light the fuse to start to move these junior stocks?
Yeah, I think that. So earlier you mentioned that we were in a range of about 21 to 26. I think that when we can get above and hold above 26, I think that that's when the effect of these new higher prices will really start to kick in. Um, People need to see these higher and sustained higher prices for a little while. I think 26 will be that kind of new floor that has prior been a ceiling to the silver price. That will be tremendous for the stocks. And when you see it cross 30, I think 30 is a psychological level that again will do tremendous things for the market. So these are some key levels, I think, technical levels that investors should watch for, and that really should be very, very should lead to explosive strength in these names.
Perfect. So you and I are going to see each other and the public pretty soon coming
That's
up.
right.
We're all going to be together in Vancouver. You're going to be talking at the Metals Investor Forum on the 18th and the 20th, and participating in the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference on the 21st and 22nd. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly. So speaking on the 18th at the Metals Investor Forum, and then speaking actually at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference on the 20, let me get that right. I believe it's the 22nd in the morning, doing a workshop around 10:30, and then later in the afternoon participating in a panel on the silver outlook with guys like Jeff Clark, Robert Kiyosaki, and certainly looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so if any of my listeners are in the Vancouver area, just look on the front page of the Prospector News. You'll see registration links for both of those events. And Peter and I both look forward to chatting with any of you guys that want to come out and chat with us. So if people want to get in touch with you, Peter, and follow your musings, how would they do so?
So I write a bi-monthly newsletter called the Silver Stock Investor that you can find more information on at silverstockinvestor.com. I've also written a book all about the opportunity that and the generational opportunity really in silver called The Great Silver Bull, which you can find on Amazon in Kindle, print, or audio. And you can follow me on LinkedIn, Peter Krauth, as well as on X, formerly Twitter, at Peter_Krauth. And those are the easiest ways.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining me, Peter, and I look forward to seeing you in Vancouver very soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Mike. And I look forward to it as well.
The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.